What are indirect costs in a nonprofit grant budget? Have you ever wondered how nonprofits manage their finances when applying for grants? One key aspect is understanding indirect costs. So, what exactly are indirect costs in a nonprofit grant budget? Indirect costs are expenses that are necessary for the overall operation of the organization but cannot be directly linked to a specific project or program. These costs support the infrastructure that allows nonprofits to deliver their services effectively. For instance, indirect costs cover general administrative functions. This includes accounting, finance, human resources, and even board meetings. These functions are essential for the smooth running of the organization but are not tied to any single program. Indirect costs also include overhead expenses. Think about office rent, utilities, technology, and even telephone and copier usage. These are everyday expenses that keep the lights on and the organization functioning, but they do not directly contribute to a specific project. Another important aspect is that indirect costs encompass essential support services. For example, fundraising administration and bank fees fall into this category. However, it is important to note that fundraising expenses themselves are typically considered direct costs and are not included in the indirect cost pool. When nonprofits create grant budgets, they often calculate an indirect cost rate. This rate is a percentage applied to the direct costs of a project to recover these overhead expenses. Nonprofits can negotiate this rate with funders or establish it through a federally negotiated indirect cost rate agreement for federal grants. This agreement formalizes the percentage of indirect costs a nonprofit can include in its grant budgets. Recovering indirect costs is vital for nonprofits. It ensures that organizations are compensated for the full cost of running their programs, including necessary administrative support. Without recovering these costs, nonprofits risk underfunding essential functions, which can affect program delivery and sustainability. In practical terms, when preparing grant budgets, nonprofits separate direct costs from indirect costs. Direct costs are those directly tied to the project, while indirect costs support the organization as a whole. Funders may apply a standard indirect cost rate, which is often around 29% of project costs, or accept a negotiated rate based on the nonprofit's financial structure. Nonprofits must carefully follow funder guidelines on what costs are allowable as indirect and how to calculate and apply the indirect cost rate. Properly managing indirect costs is a key part of grant writing and management. This enables nonprofits to maintain financial health while fulfilling their mission-driven work. Understanding indirect costs is essential for any nonprofit looking to secure funding and ensure their operations run smoothly.